Deep within the pages of the Qur'an lies a verse that scholars believe points directly to our current year, 2025. What was written over 1,400 years ago seems to be unfolding before our very eyes, and the implications are staggering. Ancient texts are meeting modern reality in ways that defy conventional explanation. If you're watching this, you need to know what comes next, because, according to this prophecy, we're standing at a pivotal moment in human history. The signs are everywhere, the timeline is exact, and the next phase has already begun. Before we dive deeper into this revelation, I need to ask you something important. Where in the world are you watching this video from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments below, because what we're about to discuss affects every corner of the globe, and I want to see just how far this message is reaching. Also, if you find this information valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Trust me, you'll want to stay updated on this. Let's start with the verse itself, and why scholars across the Islamic world have been discussing it with increasing intensity as we entered 2025. The verse in question comes from Surah Ar-Rum, chapter 30 of the Qur'an, and it contains a prophecy that was fulfilled in the past, but also contains layers of meaning that many believe apply to multiple time periods throughout history. The word Rum refers to the Romans, or more broadly, the dominant Western civilization of any given era. The verse speaks of a great defeat followed by a great victory, and it provides a specific time frame that has captured the attention of those studying Islamic eschatology. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. The Arabic word used in this verse for the time frame is bidin, which translates to within a few years. In classical Arabic, this phrase specifically indicates a period between 3 and 9 years. When we look at major global events that occurred exactly in this time frame before 2025, patterns begin to emerge that are impossible to ignore. The verse doesn't just speak of random events. It speaks of the rise and fall of powers, the shifting of global authority, and a transformation in how the world operates. Scholars have been tracking economic collapses, political upheavals, technological revolutions, and spiritual awakenings that align precisely with this ancient timeline. Let's talk about what specifically happened between 2016 and 2024 that makes this prophecy so compelling. In 2016, we witnessed political earthquakes that reshaped Western democracy in ways that are still reverberating today. The unexpected outcomes of major elections, the rise of populist movements, the fracturing of long-standing alliances. These weren't just random political shifts. They represented a fundamental change in how power structures operate in the modern world. The establishment systems that had governed for decades suddenly found themselves challenged by forces they couldn't control or predict. This mirrors the themes in Surah Ar-Rum about the humbling of seemingly invincible powers. Then came 2020, and everything changed even more dramatically. A global pandemic shut down the entire world in ways that had never been seen in modern history. Economies collapsed overnight. Borders closed, the movement of people and goods ground to a halt. The very foundations of global society were tested in ways that exposed every weakness in our systems. But here's what's interesting from a prophetic perspective. This wasn't just destruction, it was also a great leveling, a moment where the mighty fell and the prepared rose, where traditional power structures lost their grip and new forms of organization emerged. The verse speaks of defeat and victory happening in close succession, and we witnessed both simultaneously, depending on which system or nation you were observing. Now, let's examine the technological dimension of this prophecy, because this is where things get really intriguing. Between 2016 and 2024, we experienced a technological acceleration unlike anything in human history. Artificial intelligence went from a futuristic concept to a present reality that's now integrated into every aspect of our lives. The rise of AI in 2023 and 2024 specifically has been so rapid that even the experts creating these systems are warning about their inability to control what they've built. We're witnessing the emergence of intelligence that operates beyond human comprehension, making decisions, creating content, and solving problems in ways that seem almost supernatural to previous generations. This technological transformation ties directly into another layer of the prophecy. Throughout Islamic eschatology, there are descriptions of a time when knowledge would increase exponentially, when communication would become instantaneous across the entire world, and when humanity would gain powers that previous generations would consider miraculous. We're living in that time right now. The knowledge available at our fingertips today exceeds the entire accumulated learning of all previous human civilizations combined. We can communicate with anyone, anywhere, instantly. We have reshaped our environment, extended our lifespans, and gained capabilities that would have been considered magic just a century ago. The prophecy suggests that this acceleration of knowledge and power would coincide with a great spiritual test for humanity. Let's talk about the economic dimension now, because the financial signs are perhaps the most concrete evidence of major prophetic fulfillment. The traditional financial system that has governed the world since World War II is showing cracks that are becoming impossible to ignore. The massive printing of money, the devaluation of currencies, the rise of alternative financial systems, and the growing distrust in central banking institutions all point to a fundamental transformation in how human beings exchange value. Cryptocurrency emerged as a direct challenge to centralized financial control, and while it's experienced extreme volatility, the underlying principle of decentralized value exchange has taken root in a way that can't be reversed. The interesting thing about the economic shifts we're seeing is how they parallel descriptions in Islamic texts about the end times. There are hadiths that speak of a time when traditional currencies would become worthless, when people would throw their gold and silver into the streets because it has no value to them. While we haven't reached that extreme yet, we're witnessing the early stages of a monetary transformation that could lead exactly there. The inflation rates, the debt crisis, the collapse of banking institutions, the distrust in fiat currencies, these are all signs of a system in its final stages. And according to the timeline we're examining, 2025 represents a critical juncture in this economic transformation. Now, here's where we need to connect these various threads to understand what 2025 specifically represents in this prophetic framework. If we count the bid-in from the major shifts that began in 2016, we arrive precisely at 2024 and 2025 as the culmination point. This isn't just numerology or wishful interpretation. The events themselves are providing the evidence. In 2024, we saw accelerations in every dimension we've discussed, political instability reaching new heights, technological breakthroughs happening almost weekly, economic uncertainty spreading across every major economy, and social movements challenging fundamental assumptions about governance and society. The prophecy in Surah Ar-Rum speaks of a victory following the defeat, and this is where we need to pay very close attention to what might be unfolding now. The victory referenced in Islamic interpretation isn't necessarily military, though it could include that dimension. It's a victory of truth over falsehood, of justice over oppression, of divine order over human chaos. Many scholars interpret this as the moment when the truth becomes undeniable, when the systems built on deception and exploitation collapse under their own weight, and when a new paradigm based on authentic values emerges from the ruins of the old order. Let's examine the social dimension of this transformation, because what's happening in society right now is perhaps the most visible sign of prophetic fulfillment. We're witnessing a massive awakening of consciousness across the planet. People are questioning narratives they've been told their entire lives. They're rejecting institutional authority that has proven corrupt or incompetent. They're seeking authentic spirituality rather than empty religious formalism. They're building alternative communities, alternative economies, alternative systems of governance. This isn't happening in isolation. It's a global phenomenon affecting every culture and society simultaneously. The old gatekeepers of information and authority are losing their power as people gain direct access to knowledge and direct communication with each other. Islamic eschatology describes a period before the major end times events where there would be great confusion and fitna, or trial. We're absolutely living through that period right now. The confusion about what's true and what's false has never been greater. Fake news, deep fakes, propaganda, manipulation. It's all creating an environment where determining truth requires more effort and discernment than ever before. But this confusion itself is part of the prophetic timeline. It's the darkness before the dawn, the chaos that precedes the establishment of a new order. And according to the timeline we're examining, 2025 represents the point where the confusion begins to resolve, where clarity starts to emerge from the fog. Now let's talk about something that many find uncomfortable, but that's central to understanding this prophecy: the role of conflict and upheaval in the transformation process. The verse from Surah Ar-Rum was revealed in the context of a great battle between the Romans and the Persians, two superpowers of that era. The Muslims were few and weak at that time, and the verse predicted that after the Romans' defeat, they would achieve victory within a few years, and that this victory would bring joy to the believers. The historical fulfillment of this prophecy is well documented, but many scholars see it as a template that repeats throughout history. Each era has its own Romans and Persians, its own superpowers in conflict, and each era experiences its own cycle of defeat and victory. In our current time, we're witnessing tensions between major powers that many fear could escalate into broader conflict. The prophecy doesn't necessarily predict or endorse such conflict, but it acknowledges that human history moves through these cycles of tension and resolution. What's important from a prophetic perspective is not just the conflict itself, but what emerges from it. The victory mentioned in the verse isn't just military triumph. It's the establishment of a better order, the vindication of truth, the elevation of justice. If we're in the time frame predicted by this verse, then 2025 should see movements toward resolution, toward the emergence of clarity from confusion, toward the beginning of a new paradigm that addresses the failures of the old system. Let's examine the spiritual dimension more deeply, because this might be the most significant aspect of what's prophesied for this time. There's been a massive return to religious and spiritual seeking across the world, particularly among young people who were raised in secular environments. Islam specifically has seen explosive growth in converts from Western countries, people seeking answers that materialist philosophy couldn't provide. This isn't just about religion in a formal sense. It's about people recognizing that there's more to existence than what modern secularism offers. They're seeking meaning, purpose, moral framework, and connection to something transcendent. The prophecy suggests that truth would become increasingly clear during this period, and we're seeing exactly that: people's hearts and minds opening to realities they previously dismissed or ignored. One of the most fascinating aspects of this prophetic timeline is how it relates to the concept of divine permission and timing. Islamic theology teaches that Allah controls the rise and fall of nations, the timing of events, and the unfolding of history according to a divine plan. Human beings have free will within this framework, but there are appointed times when certain transformations will occur regardless of human resistance. The prophecy in Surah Ar-Rum emphasizes that the victory will come on that day, suggesting a specific appointed time chosen by Allah. If 2025 represents such an appointed time in this prophetic cycle, then we should expect to see events unfold in ways that couldn't have been predicted or controlled by human planning alone. We should expect surprises, unexpected reversals, and outcomes that defy conventional analysis. Let's look at the environmental dimension of this prophecy as well, because the natural world itself seems to be participating in this transformation. We're experiencing weather patterns and natural events that are breaking all historical records. The scientific community describes this as climate change, but from a prophetic perspective, it's the Earth itself responding to human corruption and excess. Islamic texts speak extensively about signs in nature that would accompany the major transitions in human history: earthquakes increasing in frequency, unusual weather patterns, the sun rising differently. These aren't just metaphorical descriptions. We're witnessing concrete environmental changes that are forcing humanity to reconsider its relationship with the natural world. The prophecy connects human spiritual state with natural consequences, suggesting that as humanity transforms spiritually, the natural world will reflect that transformation. Now, what about the geopolitical dimension? This is where current events become particularly relevant to our discussion. We're seeing a fundamental restructuring of global power arrangements. The unipolar world order that emerged after the Cold War is clearly ending. Multiple power centers are rising, traditional alliances are fracturing, and new coalitions are forming along different lines than the old ideological divisions. The prophecy speaks of power shifting in unexpected ways, and that's exactly what we're witnessing. Nations that were considered weak or peripheral are gaining influence while established powers struggle with internal divisions and declining legitimacy. The Middle East, specifically the heartland of Islamic civilization, is experiencing a resurgence of confidence and capability that seemed impossible just a decade ago. The timing of all these convergent transformations, political, economic, technological, social, spiritual, environmental, geopolitical, happening simultaneously in 2025 is what makes this prophetic interpretation so compelling. If these were isolated events occurring randomly over decades, it would be easy to dismiss as coincidence. But we're witnessing a synchronized transformation across every dimension of human civilization, all reaching critical points within the exact time frame predicted by a text written over 1,400 years ago. The probability of this being mere coincidence diminishes with each passing month as more pieces fall into place. Let's talk about what this means practically for people living through this time. If we accept that we're in a period of prophetic fulfillment, what should we be doing? The first imperative is to seek truth with sincere intention. In times of great confusion and deception, the quality that protects a person is sincere commitment to truth, regardless of where it leads. This means questioning our assumptions, examining our beliefs, and being willing to change our minds when evidence demands it. It means not being attached to particular outcomes or identities, but being attached to truth itself. The prophecy suggests that truth will become increasingly clear during this period, but only for those who are genuinely seeking it. The second practical imperative is to prepare for instability. Transformation is, by definition, unstable. The old order doesn't give way to the new order smoothly and peacefully. There are periods of chaos, uncertainty, and disruption. We're clearly in such a period now. And if the prophetic timeline is accurate, the instability will likely intensify before it resolves. This means building resilience in every dimension of life: financial, social, spiritual, practical. It means not being overly dependent on systems that are showing signs of failure. It means cultivating real skills, real relationships, and real inner strength that can weather external turbulence. The third imperative is to maintain hope and positive action despite the chaos. This is crucial. The prophecy isn't about doom and destruction for its own sake. It's about the necessary destruction of falsehood to make way for truth, the necessary collapse of unjust systems to make way for justice. Every night is followed by dawn. Every winter is followed by spring. The darkness we're experiencing is the darkness before breakthrough, not the darkness of permanent defeat. This perspective changes everything about how we navigate these times. Instead of despairing, we recognize that we're witnessing the birth pangs of a better world. Instead of withdrawing, we engage actively in building that better world, even as the old one crumbles around us. There's another layer to this prophecy that deserves attention, the personal dimension. While the verse speaks of nations and civilizations, Islamic teaching always emphasizes that external changes reflect internal realities. The state of the world reflects the state of human hearts. If we're in a period of prophetic transformation for civilization, it means we're also in a period of prophetic transformation for individuals. Each person alive today is being called to their own internal victory over their own internal defeat. We're being called to transform our character, purify our intentions, align our lives with truth, and become vehicles for the divine will in the world. The external transformation we're witnessing is inseparable from the internal transformation we're called to undertake. Now, let's address some of the skepticism that naturally arises around prophetic interpretations. Critics might say that every generation thinks they're living in the end times, that people always see patterns in current events that confirm their religious beliefs. This is a valid concern, and it's true that prophecy can be misinterpreted or applied prematurely. However, what distinguishes our current moment is not just the subjective feeling that times are unusual, but the objective convergence of measurable trends across multiple domains. We can quantify the technological acceleration, track the economic instability, document the geopolitical shifts, measure the environmental changes. These aren't vague feelings. They're concrete data points that happen to align with an ancient timeline. The question isn't whether something significant is happening. It clearly is. The question is whether the ancient text provides a framework for understanding what's happening. Let's also consider what comes after 2025. According to this prophetic framework, if the verse from Surah Ar-Rum is being fulfilled in our time, the victory it predicts doesn't mean instant utopia. It means the beginning of a new phase, a phase where truth has gained the upper hand, but still must be actively established and defended. Islamic eschatology describes multiple phases of transformation before the ultimate end times. We might be entering a phase where authentic values gain mainstream acceptance, where corrupt systems lose their power to deceive, where justice becomes possible in ways it hasn't been for generations. But this phase will still require work, struggle, and commitment from those who understand what's at stake. The role of technology in the next phase deserves special consideration. We mentioned earlier the rapid rise of artificial intelligence, but we need to think more deeply about what this means prophetically. Islamic texts speak of the Dajjal, the Antichrist figure, as possessing powers that would seem miraculous to people. Some scholars interpret this as referring to technological capabilities that would give certain groups godlike power over others. We're rapidly approaching that reality with AI, biotechnology, and other emerging technologies. The question for the next phase is whether these technologies will be used to enslave and deceive, or whether they'll be harnessed for genuine human flourishing. The prophetic timeline suggests we're at the decision point. and the choices made in 2025 will determine which path we take. There's also the dimension of revelation and disclosure. Many people sense that we're in a period where long-hidden truths are being revealed. Corruption that was concealed for decades is being exposed. Conspiracies that were dismissed as crazy are being confirmed. Technologies that were hidden are being acknowledged. This mass revelation, this pulling back of the curtain, is itself a sign, according to Islamic eschatology. There are hadiths speaking of a time when the hidden would be made manifest, when secrets would be shouted from the rooftops, when nothing would remain concealed. We're living through exactly that kind of disclosure moment, and it's accelerating rather than slowing down. If the prophetic timeline is accurate, 2025 should see major revelations that change how millions of people understand their world. Let's return to the original verse from Surah Ar-Rum and examine one more layer of meaning. The verse says that when the victory comes, the believers will rejoice in the victory of Allah. This is significant. The rejoicing isn't in human achievement or military conquest, but in the recognition that divine justice is being established. What this suggests for our current moment is that the transformation we're witnessing isn't primarily about human plans or movements, though humans are involved. It's about a divine plan unfolding according to divine timing. The role of believers in this process is to recognize what's happening, align themselves with the truth, and participate in establishing justice, but with the understanding that the ultimate outcome is assured by divine decree, not dependent on human success or failure. This understanding should produce a particular kind of calm confidence in those who accept the prophetic framework. Not the arrogance of thinking we know exactly how events will unfold, because we don't, but the confidence that comes from trusting in divine wisdom and justice even when circumstances seem chaotic or frightening. The world might look like it's falling apart, but from a prophetic perspective, it's actually coming together. The false structures are collapsing precisely so that true structures can be built. The deceptions are being exposed precisely so that truth can prevail. The injustices are being revealed precisely so that justice can be established. Every apparent negative is actually a necessary step toward a positive transformation. Now, as we approach the end of this discussion, we need to address the question of personal responsibility. Believing in prophetic fulfillment doesn't absolve us of the obligation to act righteously and work for positive change. In fact, it increases that obligation. If we truly believe we're living through a pivotal moment in history, then every action we take carries greater weight. How we respond to these times will determine not just our own fate, but our role in the larger transformation. Will we be among those who recognized the truth and acted accordingly? Or will we be among those who saw the signs but remained attached to the old order out of fear or material interest? These are the questions each individual must answer for themselves. The prophecy in Surah Ar-Rum ultimately offers both a warning and a promise. The warning is that attachments to falsehood, to unjust systems, to material security built on exploitation, all of this will be swept away. No amount of wealth or power will protect those who have sided with oppression when the transformation comes. But the promise is that truth will prevail, justice will be established, and those who align themselves with truth, regardless of personal cost, will witness the victory they worked for. That victory might not look exactly like what we imagine. It might come through means we didn't expect, but according to the prophetic framework, it is inevitable because it's ordained by the one who controls all affairs. So here we are in 2025, watching these prophecies unfold in real time. The time frame specified in the verse has arrived. The signs described across Islamic eschatology are visible in every dimension of life. The question isn't whether something significant is happening. It obviously is. The question is how we interpret what's happening and how we respond to it. Do we see only chaos and fear? Or do we recognize the hand of divine justice working through human events to establish a better order? Do we cling desperately to systems that are clearly failing? Or do we courageously participate in building what comes next? The beauty of the prophetic perspective is that it provides meaning in the midst of chaos. When everything seems random and frightening, the prophetic framework reveals purpose and direction. We're not just witnessing the random collapse of civilization. We're witnessing the purposeful transformation of civilization toward a higher state. The birth is painful, but the life that emerges makes the pain worthwhile. This is what the prophecy promises, that the defeat is temporary and necessary, but the victory is permanent and transformative. As we conclude, remember that prophecy isn't about passive observation. It's about active participation informed by divine guidance. The fact that you're watching this video, the fact that you're thinking about these questions, the fact that you're seeking understanding in these confusing times, this itself is part of the prophetic process. You're being called to wake up, to see clearly, to choose consciously. The transformation happening in the world must be matched by transformation in your own heart and life. That's the real message of the prophecy, that divine victory in the world comes through divine victory in individual hearts. The external reflects the internal, always. What happens next is being written right now by the choices we make, the stands we take, the truths we embrace or reject. The prophecy tells us that victory is assured, but it doesn't tell us which individuals will be part of that victory. That remains each person's choice. The verse from Surah Ar-Rum predicted 2025 exactly, and here we are living through what was foretold centuries ago. The next chapter is unfolding now, and you have a role to play in it, whether you recognize it or not. Choose wisely, act righteously, and trust in the divine wisdom that's orchestrating these events. The future belongs to truth, and truth is making its move right now. Make sure you're standing on the right side when the transformation completes.